Welcome to News Wrap Local. I'm your host, Justin Chapman. Thanks for being here. A quick note of shameless self-promotion. I won second place in the hard news category and third place in the obituary category at the LA Press Club's Journalism Awards this weekend for my article in Alta Journal about Mad Mike Hughes, the flat earther daredevil rocketeer. But today, after providing a few brief updates on this month's local stories, we'll speak with our special guest, Congresswoman Judy Chu, whose district includes much of Pasadena, about her federal abortion rights bill, progress on the dual infrastructure bills, and how what she's working on in Congress directly impacts Pasadena. But before we get started, let's check out these Pasadena Media news briefs.
After decades in limbo, relinquishment of properties making up the proposed 710 Freeway North Corridor could soon become a reality. Pasadena officials are approaching an agreement that will give city leaders an opportunity to reintegrate the area into the fabric of the community. Cities in the San Gabriel Valley, including Pasadena, Alhambra, and South Pasadena, have worked for years to remove the 710 Freeway Northerly Extension project from the state's highways plan. The now defunct extension would have included a tunnel proposed by Caltrans and the LA County Metropolitan Transportation Authority to connect the 710 to the 210 freeway. Metro voted against the tunnel project in May 2017, citing the estimated price tag and a lack of political will. As currently constructed, the 710 freeway's end at Valley Boulevard in the city of Alhambra forces traffic onto local streets. Drivers must then travel 4.5 miles to the 210 freeway entrance. The Pasadena City Council plans an extensive public outreach effort anticipated to begin in late 2022. The U.S. Department of Labor has unveiled plans to protect workers from heat-related stress and illness. Modeled after a bill introduced by Congresswoman Judy Chu earlier this year, the new policy will require the Department of Labor to take notice of a new rulemaking process to create federal heat standards for workers both indoors and out. Unannounced inspections will begin at workplaces whenever temperatures rise above 80 degrees. Create a national emphasis program on heat, and establish a heat work group with the National Advisory Board on Labor. The new policy is similar to Chu's House Resolution 2193, which she proposed back in March. Known as the Asuncion Valdivia Heat, Illness, and Fatalities Prevention Act, the resolution required the Occupational Safety and Health Administration to develop enforceable national standards regarding worker exposure to heat. The new legislation is more important than ever as climate change has created greater risk for workers. Assistant City Manager Julie Gutierrez has given notice that she will retire. Gutierrez's career highlights include implementing the City Hall restoration project, implementing the Gold Line stations in Pasadena, and securing legislation to end the 710 freeway extension. Earlier this year, City Manager Steve Mermel and Police Chief John Perez also announced their upcoming retirements. Mermel was part of both the Water and Power and Finance departments before being promoted to Assistant City Manager. He became the city's top executive in 2016. With Perez retiring, Deputy Chief Cheryl Moody, a 27-year veteran of the department, is likely to serve as interim chief. Public Information Officer Lisa Derderian said, "Losing Steve Mermel, Julie Gutierrez, and John Perez within months of each other is certainly significant. They have led us through some of the most challenging times the city has faced. Their knowledge, leadership, professionalism, and love for the Pasadena community and city staff will be difficult to replace."
As you just saw, the biggest story this month was the unexpected announcement by City Manager Steve Mermel that he is retiring effective December 2nd. Pasadena Now reported that the city will lose 100 years of institutional knowledge in the coming months. I've heard mixed responses about Steve's tenure, but as former mayor who has served as city manager for several cities, Rick Cole put it, Pasadenans should, quote, spend less time thinking about what you liked or didn't like about the last city manager and more time thinking about what Pasadena will need during the next 5 years, end quote. This city deserves a city manager who wants to raise all boats in the harbor. Perhaps it's time to consider amending the city charter to make Pasadena a strong mayor system of government, to make the top job in this city accountable to the electorate. Let's turn now to our lightning round of news updates. 1. All city employees were supposed to be fully vaccinated by September 17th or undergo weekly testing. More than 87% of employees reported being partially or fully vaccinated. More than 89.4% of Pasadena residents are fully vaccinated, and 96.1% have at least one dose, which I think really speaks to the character of Pasadenans. 2. City Council approved a 3-year, $640,000 subscription to ShotSpotter, an acoustic gunshot detection system, in response to a rise of gun violence in Pasadena. The system works by using microphones and sensors to listen for gunshots and alert police. The company says it's 90% accurate, but activists in cities where the system is in use, such as Chicago and Sacramento, say it's inaccurate and causes more harm than good by resulting in wrongful imprisonment. The Council's Public Safety Committee will review the system's impact in 1 year. 3. The city's redistricting task force has moved into the public hearing stage of the process after receiving final demographic numbers from the 2020 census. Most city council districts lost residents, except for districts 4, 6, and 7, resulting in a total of 139,255 residents citywide, 36.6% of whom are white, 33% are Latino, 19.2% are Asian, 8.6% are Black, and about 2.6% are other races. There are 2 more redistricting public hearings on October 23rd and 30th. Then the task force will submit its recommendations to the council in November, ahead of the December 15th deadline for the city to adopt any new maps ahead of the June 7th, 2022 primary election for council districts 3, 5, and 7. There's an emerging debate now about whether to carve out Madison Heights from District 7 and include it in District 6, or to make District 7 more of a downtown district that incorporates much of the Playhouse Village in Old Pasadena, rather than each district getting a piece of Colorado Boulevard. 4. After completing a nationwide search that spanned 4 months, Tony Olmos has been appointed Pasadena Public Works Department Director. He will begin November 1st. He previously served in the same position at the city of Brea. 5. Abortion rights supporters marched in caravan from the Rose Bowl to City Hall earlier this month to protest the new restrictive Texas law that bans abortions at around 6 weeks, when many women don't even realize they're pregnant. Marches took place across the country, with the one in Pasadena sponsored by Caravan for Choice, Planned Parenthood, and a number of local groups. 6. Vice Mayor and City Council member Andy Wilson of District 7 announced he will not seek re-election. Meanwhile, Pasadena Planning Commission Vice Chair Jason Lyon and former Pasadena Planning Commission, Library Commission, and Recreation and Parks Commission member Siren Hajian announced that they will run for that seat in the June election. 7. Congressman Adam Schiff discussed his new book, Midnight in Washington: How We Almost Lost Our Democracy and Still Could, last Saturday during a Romans event at Pasadena Presbyterian. You can read about what he said in my article in Pasadena Now. Stay tuned to News Wrap Local next month when Congressman Schiff will be our guest. 8. The council conducted its first reading of an ordinance to allow unlimited campaign contributions. The mayor and 5 council members voted for it in August, with 1 no vote from Jess Rivas and 1 absence. The council was forced to take action following the passage of Assembly Bill 571, which limits campaign contributions to $4,900 per contributor. A group of Pasadena residents are calling on the council to limit campaign contributions, saying that it, quote, would engender trust in Pasadena city leaders and candidates and help create a city that is truly more inclusive of everyone, end quote. 9. The Doodah Parade has been postponed until next year due to current health guidelines. However, the Rose Parade will be held as planned on January 1st. And 10. As I reported in Pasadena Now, the Supreme Court declined to review the Pasadena Republican Club's lawsuit against the city of Pasadena and the Western Justice Center for alleged political and religious discrimination for canceling an event featuring Dr. John Eastman, the conservative lawyer who led the anti-same-sex marriage Prop 8 in California in 2008 and wrote a memo to Trump arguing that Pence could and should refuse to certify Biden's election on January 6. By declining to review the case, the court essentially agreed with both the trial court and the Ninth Circuit Appeals Court that the Western Justice Center was not a state actor and that the city of Pasadena could not be held responsible for its actions. Let's patch in our guests, Congressmember Judy Chu. Congressmember Chu, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Rep. Chu was the first Chinese American woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2009. Her district, California's 27th, includes Pasadena and the West San Gabriel Valley. She currently serves on the House Ways and Means Committee and the House Small Business Committee. She began her career on the Garvey School District Board of Education and the Monterey Park City Council, where she served as mayor 3 times. She then was elected to the State Assembly and then the State Board of Equalization. So, Congressmember Chu, Pasadenans recently marched in support of abortion rights and across the country. And of course, the courts have gone back and forth over this recent Texas fetal heartbeat abortion ban. You authored a federal abortion rights bill in the House, which the House passed earlier this year, right? Last month, I believe. What would that bill do, and where does it stand right now?
The Women's Health Protection Act would enshrine the protections of Roe versus Wade into federal statute. It would give patients the right, and it would allow providers to provide abortion care free from the medically restrictive and unnecessary laws passed by various states. And these are laws such as dictating the width of clinic doors, requiring an ultrasound, or requiring a doctor to have admitting privileges in a nearby hospital. These are unnecessary to abortion itself, and its only purpose is to restrict abortion. So yes, if Roe versus Wade is struck down by the Supreme Court, this bill would ensure that every woman would have access to abortion in every state in the union. And it would guarantee that she could access it regardless of her zip code.
And where does it stand in the Senate? Are you hopeful that we'll see some progress there?
I have a wonderful partner in Senator Richard Blumenthal. He is the sponsor of the same bill on the Senate side. He has 48 co-sponsors, which is very healthy. And Senator Casey is still reviewing it. So is Senator Murkowski on the Republican side. That would bring us to a majority of the Senate. Unfortunately, we have this terrible rule called the filibuster, and it has killed so many important things that we need to do, including voting rights, the Equality Act, all kinds of things. It is my hope that we can strike down the filibuster. If we can, then we can actually get this passed. And already President Biden has said that he would sign this bill into law. And it's so needed now, especially because of the Texas law. The Texas law just shocked people because it was so extreme, because it said that you could not have an abortion after 6 weeks. And that's before most women know that they're pregnant. Mm-hmm. And then allowed for vigilante bounty hunters who could go after anyone who assisted that woman, from the doctor to the clinic staff to anybody who helped pay for the abortion, to an Uber driver who takes that woman to the clinic. And they could be sued for $10,000 each. And so it turns citizens against citizens. And that is just frightening and downright bone chilling. That's the kind of thing that we have to stop.
Right. And I guess that's going back to the Supreme Court again soon.
Yes.
So you recently signed a letter sent to the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers, urging the association to negotiate collaboratively in good faith with Hollywood craft workers, advocating for improved wages and working conditions on movie and TV sets. A strike was narrowly avoided this past weekend when IATSE, the workers' union, came to an agreement. I've heard that the it's split over whether they like that agreement or not. Are you following that? What are your thoughts on that situation?
I am following it. I am so relieved, though, that they did reach an agreement. And it is especially it's so important for us here in Pasadena. Our area has so many of these kind of workers in the creative industries, the technicians, the lighting people, the set decorators, the makeup artists. It is so important, for one thing, to make sure that they have the working conditions that they deserve, that they have the benefits, that they are able to make ends meet. And in fact, the reason that I became the founder of the Congressional Creative Rights Caucus is because of them, because I know that there's so many of them in our district. We are not Hollywood. We don't have the big stars, we don't have the big productions, but we have the people that are the workforce of Hollywood. And so that's why it is so important for them to get these benefits. Actually, they nearly brought these studios down to their knees. I mean, it was unheard of for them to be able to have such a strong show of force. So actually, I have to really commend them.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing sort of a rise in union strength lately. You also recently introduced a bill that would provide more workforce protections for heat stress. Tell us about that bill.
Yes. Well, this all started 15 years ago when I was in the California State Assembly. Mr. Asunción Valdivia was a farm worker, and he was picking grapes for 10 hours straight in 105-degree temperatures when he fell over. And the GMR Vineyards told the son to just take him home and didn't order an ambulance to take him to the hospital. On the way home, the son saw the father foam at the mouth, fall over, and actually die right in front of his eyes of a preventable heat stroke. And so the United Farm Workers came to me and said, enough is enough. We have been petitioning OSHA for 15 years to try to get some standards with regard to heat illness. And so that's why I introduced the bill. And in fact, 15 years ago, the provisions of the bill, which are pretty much common sense, it's about having shade, water, and rest periods. So that was adopted. It was put into law for outdoor workers in California. But we still have a job to do because that leaves out indoor workers and also leaves out all the other states. So when I got to Congress, I said, I really need to make sure that these kind of regulations are there for the entire nation, especially as we see the effects of climate change. And in fact, 2020 was the hottest year on record in the globe. So we see that if anything, there have to be more efforts towards heat protection. So I have introduced that bill for both indoor and outdoor workers. And I was so pleased because President Biden just recently announced he's going to be doing some rulemaking for OSHA to provide some standards for workers with regard to heat illness.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's so important because of climate change, and we're all experiencing these more disruptive weather events lately, and that's only going to get worse. From what we can tell right now, it seems like Senator Joe Manchin is insisting that the Build Back Better infrastructure bill not include some key climate provisions. With time running out on this issue, do you think Congress is going to take action we need to protect against climate change before it's too late?
We must. He is objecting to one provision. Of course, it is a very big provision in our climate strategy. Nonetheless, we still can make some progress, I think, towards climate change. The climate provisions do a lot of great things, such as provide tax credits for solar, wind, and other renewable energy. It gives a big boost to regular people to buy electric vehicles, but also for governments to buy electric vehicles. It shores up our recharging infrastructure for renewable energy. It makes sure that our state governments have more resources with which to change over to renewable energy. So I hope that those provisions can stay in. Now's the time to do it. There is that bipartisan infrastructure bill, but it didn't go far enough. Mm-hmm. It was far from being able to do enough to deal with climate change. And now is the time. Clearly now is the time. And the American people want us to do something about climate change.
Right. And speaking of the two infrastructure bills, do you think progressive and moderate Democrats are going to be able to work through their differences on these and pass both of the bills? And if so, when do you think that's going to happen?
Well, we are returning this week to Congress, and this is going to be the topic that we will be taking up every single day. There'll be a lot of negotiations going on, and we have to reduce the human infrastructure bill that we call Build Back Better from 3.5 trillion to 2 trillion. I wish it could be larger because now is our chance to really get something done. But I know that we have to look at the things that this Build Back Better bill could do to help the American people. And I think we have to start from there, from the most important things that could help the people. For instance, a lot of people aren't returning to work because they still have a problem with childcare. Well, this bill will allow for a subsidy on childcare so that no American is paying more than 7% of their income for childcare. And so many Americans are worried about having to take time off work just to take care of a loved one. So we need paid family leave. We are the only developed nation without a paid family leave program. So this would provide for 12 weeks of paid family leave. It would also expand Medicare so that there would be dental, vision, and hearing. And it would make sure that there is a permanency to the child tax credit. You know, we had this big rollout of the child tax credit, but it'll disappear by the end of the year. Mm-hmm. So we want to expand it. We want to make it permanent. And by the way, this whole thing is paid for. It's paid for by making corporate tax dodgers and the wealthiest 1.8% pay their fair share in taxes. Just a little factoid, which is 55 of the biggest corporations paid $0 in federal income taxes last year, despite making $40 billion in profits. And the wealthiest billionaires paid almost nothing.
Where do you fall on the debate of whether to do fewer programs for longer or cut back on or have all the programs and cut back on the amount that is spent on them?
I think that it's important to have as many programs as possible. So I fall on that end. The reason is that I think that the American people need to experience those programs. They need to see that there is a better way of life that other countries take for granted. Mm-hmm. And I think that once we get those programs established, then we can renew it later on. We can provide the funding later on. But I think now's the time to make sure that we establish those programs and reduce this terrible income inequality where working families are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. You know that the average American family doesn't have $400 for an emergency. They have so few savings now that they couldn't even deal with a $400 emergency.
Right. And can you talk to us a little bit about how, what you're working on in Congress impacts Pasadena directly? Like how do you balance working on these national and international, these huge issues with working on issues that you tangibly impact your constituents? And do you see those as intricately connected?
Well, I just put forth an appropriations proposal for Pasadena, which did actually make it in the appropriations bill. One was for broadband across the entire city of Pasadena to make it free. And I'm very, very proud that it did make it in. The appropriations bills are still to be taken up by the Senate. It also has some other proposals that will benefit Pasadena directly, such as a protected bike lane that will hook up to the Gold Line metro stations so that it can get people out of their cars and using mass transit. Also, I got my San Gabriel National Recreation Area bill passed out of the House. It's the San Gabriel Mountains. It will expand the area covered by those mountains so it can be even better used by the people out there.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Congresswoman Chu, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you taking the time and providing us an update on what you're working on in Congress.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Before we go, here is this month in Pasadena history. It was this month in 1918, during the second wave of the influenza pandemic, that Pasadena's Board of City Directors banned all public gatherings, closed all churches, theaters, and schools, and began quarantines, according to a monograph by Mark Eberl published last year. At the time, it was reported that Pasadena had only 53 cases of influenza, all mild, but deaths were soon being reported. New guidelines also recommended store employees and others wear cloth masks. More than 60 people were arrested for not wearing masks on the day the rule took effect. That pandemic ended up killing 50 million people worldwide, including nearly 700,000 in the US. Thank you all so much for joining me for this episode of News Wrap Local with Justin Chapman. Tune in every third Friday of the month at 5 p.m. Learn more at PasadenaMedia.org and JustinDouglasChapman.com. Sign up for my monthly email newsletter to get updates on my work by visiting justinchapman.substack.com. See you again next month.